Hello, so today we are going to start the circle weaving. So it's a simple cardboard loom, but in the shape of a circle, and we're going to do a simple over-under weaving technique. So the weaving part will probably be the easiest part of this assignment, but getting the loom set up correctly and just starting the beginning of it will be the hardest part. So the first thing we're going to work on is the background piece. This pattern paper that's black and white patterns in the back of the loom to start with. So you're going to start with a small white piece of paper. You're going to get yourself a circle pattern, place it on the paper and trace around it with your pencil. You're going to then take a ruler and you're going to draw a line going across the center of the circle. And then you're going to draw a line that crosses over to find the middle. And then you're going to do some, I like to put my pencil right on the center point. And you're going to do two more lines kind of diagonal in between the T that you made. So you're going to kind of make a T and an X. So this is my T line and then my X line. And you can see it's not exactly in the middle of my circle. And that's okay. If that bothers you, cut your circle out. Fold it in half, and that way you'll be able to find the middle, the center of your circle perfectly. But this is just a little off, and that's okay. So now within each one of these 8 spaces, I want you to do a different kind of pattern. You can do stripes, polka dots, zigzags. I'll have my handouts with some more complicated patterns if you want to try those. But I want you to remember on this paper here that the pattern part, the most of the pattern part that you're going to see is going to be along the outer edge of the circle. So you don't want to spend a lot of time and detail on the center of this circle. You want to make sure you have some nice, neat patterns on the outside. So you might want to think that through. So I'm going to do some curved lines. And you can do a variety of thick and thin lines that'll create some interest. I'm going to add some polka dots. And so on and so forth. And you're going to do that with your pencil, and then you're going to take a black marker and color in every other point, every other part of that pattern. So I'm going to start first with the lines. I'm not going to worry about the circle, tracing the circle with my marker, because that part's going to get cut. But if you want, feel free to trace that circle, that line around the outer edge of the circle with your marker. But you're going to cut it, so to me it doesn't really matter. So hopefully you've taken your pencil and you've drawn some real interesting patterns all the way around the circle, filling in each one of the spaces. Try to come up with a different pattern, and then you're going to color in with the marker every other space. So you're going to color a space, skip a space, color a space, skip a space. So you get a nice graphic black and white pattern, alternating pattern paper. And with the polka dots, you can color the polka dots in, or you could color in the background, whatever you want. I think I'll color in the background around my polka dots. Alright, so now you're going to cut that circle out. I want you to try and cut the circle out as neatly as possible. And then you're going to get yourself a piece of cardboard. This is going to be your loom. You're going to lay down that circle pattern again on the cardboard and trace around it with your pencil. You want to cut this out as neatly as possible. Stay right on the pencil lines and try to make it a nice circle, because you're going to glue this onto the top and you don't want the cardboard to stick out the edges. Now you're going to glue this paper onto the circle pattern. And you don't want to go crazy with the glue because it's going to leave kind of a bump. So maybe do 2 circles of glue. And then line this up with the edges of your cardboard. And I would like you to try to avoid seeing any of the cardboard poking out the sides of your paper. So like I have a little bit of cardboard poking out here. If I turn my circle, I might be able to find a place for it to cover up, but it doesn't look like I will. I'm actually, let's see. I'm going to line up this side and I'll just trim that off. Now when you trim, be careful not to cut the paper. Okay. Now you have to flip your loom over and write your name on the back so we know it's yours. Now your back probably won't look like this. Somehow I lucked out with a nice plain white back, but yours is going to have probably red print on it and black print on the back. And you can use a Sharpie marker, permanent marker on the back if you want, but since mine's nice and clean, I'm just going to write my name. And then of course you need the day you have art, day A, day B, day C. Now you need to cut the little slits on the back to where your warp strings go through. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to get a little piece of cardboard scrap. It looks like scrap, so please don't throw this away. This is measured so that it is the correct width. And you're going to lay this hanging off the edge of your cardboard, and you're going to put a little mark on both sides. The first time you use this cardboard, you're going to put a little mark on both sides so that this width is the width of this piece. Then you're going to turn and you're going to line up the edge of the line that touches the edge of the circle. You're going to line that up with the cardboard so you can see I'm kind of overlapping that line a little bit, and then I put a little mark on the other side. So now that this space and this space is the same width as that. I'm going to turn, lay my cardboard down, put my mark, and you're going to use this cardboard to space out your teeth in your loom. Alright, so when you get to the last space, it's either going to be really wide, or if you lay this down, you're going to have a skinny spot there. What is most important is that you have an odd number of little lines. So what's going to determine whether or not you add that last little line is how many do you have here right now. So if I start here and I count, it should be an odd number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So 16 is not an odd number. 16 you can divide by 2 and get 2 equal parts of 8. So that is not an odd number. So I do need to add this last little mark to make 17. And so now 17. Now, that's kind of over close to that side. So I think what I'm going to do is erase that and just find the middle here and put a mark right there. That just looks a little bit neater to me. And then I need you to make sure you put this back with the other pieces because this is, like I said, measured the right size. Alright, so now you're going to cut these little marks. And you don't need to cut real deep. Maybe 1/2 inch. If you're not sure what 1/2 inch is, get a ruler out and look. I wouldn't think any deeper than that. And you're cutting through the cardboard and your black paper with your pattern on it. So now that they're all cut, you're going to get some warp string. Looks like this. It's on a cone. And you're not going to pull a whole bunch off and cut it. You're going to leave it attached to the cone. Don't cut any off. And then you're going to use masking tape to tape this to the back. Alright, now you're going to pull it through the tooth that it's closest to, and this is where you have to pay close attention. You got to come straight across and find the one. So if I use this tooth, is this space and this space equal? Now don't let the pattern to kind of confuse you. Look and make sure that's even, because if I put that one here, that's clearly not straight across because over here is less on this side of the string is less than that. But if I put it here, that's more equal. It might not be perfect, but it's really close. Then you come through that tooth straight across and pull this nice and taut. You don't want it loose and loosey-goosey and wiggly. And then you're going to come across and come to the next tooth right next to the first one that you started with. The back of this doesn't matter. The front of this needs to look like the spokes in a bicycle, or a pizza sliced into triangles. So now I come across and I make an X, a small skinny X. So I go from this tooth to that tooth. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was off the screen, sorry. So the back of this doesn't matter, but you're going to start going through the teeth right next to each other. So I came up through this tooth, now I'm going to come across, but I cross over the first one and I come down here to this tooth here to make an X. It needs to be the very next tooth over. I'm going to flip it over, and now I go to the next tooth over here. Through the tooth, flip it back over, and now I'm going to cross over to this tooth, making sure that they all kind of cross over in the middle. Pulling them taut, not so tight that the cardboard's starting to curve on me, but taut so that they're not wiggling around. Then I come back through the next tooth over, cross over this tooth, and notice that the string is still attached to the cone. I haven't cut it off yet. Through. And you just keep going around, one tooth after the next. Now don't panic if they don't all meet right here in the middle. It'll be okay. We're going to make them all kind of meet in the middle when we start weaving. Now what you're going to notice is that you have one tooth left over. That's because we have an odd number, and an odd number is very important in a circle weaving. If you have an even number of warp strings, your circle weaving, you will not be able to alternate over and under, and it will just look like a big swirl of yarn, and it will not look like a weaving. And with a weaving, remember, you alternate and you go over one, under one, over one, under one, and it will not look like this. It'll just look like a big spiral of yarn, and it won't hold itself together. So back to this, we have one tooth left over. You're going to go back through the last tooth that you came through. So if I look, here's the end of my string, I came through this, and that's the last tooth. So I'm going to come back through that last tooth that I came through, and then cross over one more time and end in the last tooth that's cut. So now I have kind of like a V shape here, and that's okay. That will work itself out in the weaving. So now I'm going to flip this over, and I ended near the tooth where I started. I'm going to cut this off the cone now. Now I finally cut this warp string. I don't cut before now. I'm going to tape that down on the back. I can put the cone away, tape away. Now I'm ready to start weaving. Now when you start this weaving, it's a little tricky. Some people get a little frustrated. If you start to get frustrated, come see me. But once you kind of get the middle going, after that it's cake. It's super easy. My 5th graders usually say, "This is the easiest weaving ever, Mrs. Jackson. We should have did this one last year instead of all those crazy techniques you make us use." So once you kind of get going, it gets a lot easier. So we're going to start with a piece of yarn, thread it through your needle, and you're going to start. When you weave, you want to make sure that you weave over, under, over, under, over, under, and you're going to keep going around. You're going to weave along the outer edge, and again, this warp string is going to be considered 2 on this half of this circle, but once we cross over the middle to this half, these warp strings are considered 1 together. So they're 1 string. You go over both of them or under both of them, but over here you separate them. So you can start wherever you want, and you can start over or under because it's your weaving and you're starting first thing, and then after that it matters. So over 1, under 1, over 1. Now I'm at the 2 strings, and on this side they count as 1, so I go over both of them, under, over. Now when you're weaving with a circle, you don't want to go all the way around. You want to go about halfway or 3/4 of the way and then pull your string. Otherwise it's going to become kind of a knot. So you're going to pull this until you have a bit of a tail here. Just have a little tail sticking up. And just leave that, we'll tuck that in later. Alright, so I left off on this warp string and I'm under it. So I start over on this one, over, under, over, under. I'm going to zoom in so you can see the center of my weaving. And I'm just going to work on the outside of the circle, going over one, under one, over one, under one, and then I'm going to pull. Now when I pull, you're going to see it's going to start. You want to pull tight. It's going to start to make a circle. It's going to start to curve around that center. And you want to make sure it's in the middle. So kind of hold your weaving up and look at it. And mine seems a little bit high, so I need to pull this down. So you're just going to take your needle and kind of push that down a little bit to make sure it's right in the middle of the circle. Don't look at your pattern. Your pattern might confuse you. It might be off center like my pattern is. You want to look at the whole circle. So I'm going to keep going around, over, under, over, under, over, under, all the way around. And you know you've alternated incorrectly when this yarn starts to kind of line up next to each other. Otherwise, when the pink is on top of the warp string, the next pink should be under it. So now I'm going to pull tight and keep going. Over, under, and pull. Now, you can pull the middle of your weaving too tight. You can pull it really tight. I've had people that have actually broken the yarn or broken the warp string. You don't want to do that. And sometimes it starts to kind of warp up and kind of almost look like a little hill. So you want to be careful not to pull too tight. But you want to pull it pretty tight here in the middle so that it starts to make that circle for you. And you know what? We don't need to tuck this in. Now that I've kind of gone around a couple of times, I can just snip that off. So real close, but not so close that I cut any warp. I'm going to cut that pink off, and now it looks perfect. And I just keep going around and around, over, under, and as long as I keep my alternating correctly, and as long as I treat this string as one and not two separate strings, I should always have this alternating in my weaving, where you see the pink is over the warp here and then it's under the warp. Let's see if I focus. Can you see that a little bit better? There we go. So you can see real close up here. Right here the pink is over it, then it's under it, and then it's over it again. And that's really important that you keep that alternating. So this is, once you kind of get the alternating correct and you're alternating over, under one, all the way around, that's all you do. You just keep doing it over and over and over again as you go around your circle. And sometimes you miss a warp, or you go over two or under two by accident, and you just pull the string back out and try again. But so far I'm doing all right. Haven't made a mistake yet. And it's really probably important that you focus on the outside warp strings, because these ones in the middle, especially at the beginning, they're kind of crossed over each other and it's hard to know which warp string is next. So that's why we focus around the outer edge of the circle when we're going over, under. Also, sometimes it's easier to get your needle through over there. So here's the middle. Looks pretty good. Alternating, that's what it should look like, and it should be in the center of your circle. So if I zoom out a little bit, you should be able to fit that right in the middle. And if it's off to one side, I've gone too far now, I can't move it. If it was a little bit smaller, I could try and move this circle over a little bit. But if it's off center a little bit, mine I think is off center a little bit. I think it's a little bit too low down here. That's okay. Your weaving will be centered on the circle, but that's okay. Hopefully it's not too far off like mine. I want to show you now what it looks like if you've done it incorrectly. So I'm going to start alternating incorrectly so you can see what that looks like. So you know if your weaving looks like this, that you've made a mistake. So I'm misweaving on purpose. So I'm making a mistake here on purpose just to show you. Okay, so you know you're doing it incorrectly if it starts to look like this. I want you to notice how you can see these warp strings. So you can see the center where it's correct and how it covers up the warp strings. It doesn't cover up the warp strings right in the very center, but as you start to move your way out, if you pull your yarn tightly and you're weaving correctly, you cover up the warp strings. But as I worked my way out and I did it wrong, you can start to see those warp strings start to show up. And if you look here, it's just basically just yarn that's spiraled around each other. It's not woven, it's woven incorrectly. So if you start to see that in your weaving, you're going to have to come back and pull that out and find the spot where you messed up. So if this happens to you and you're not sure where you messed up at, bring it to me, raise your hand, let me come over and see if I can't help you find the spot where you made a mistake. I can see the spot where I made a mistake because what I did was I alternated incorrectly. So you're going to have a spot where you either went over 2 warp strings or under 2 warp strings. And I did that, where did I do that? Right here. So if you look right here, these 2 strings, these 2 warp strings, I went under both of them. So I know I have to pull out right there, and that's where I start over. I make sure I go over this one and under this one, and now we'll get my alternating correctly. All right. So basically I just need to put my needle back on the string and keep going. Alright, so once you start to get to the end of a string, you want to go get a new color, or you can get the same color if you want to do the same color for a big portion of it. But this first string that you use, the longer the string, the bigger the center circle is going to be. The shorter the string, the smaller. Now I'm ready to start a new string, so I get a new color or the same color, and you're going to tie the ends together. And it's going to be just like what you did in 2nd and 3rd grade. We're just going to weave these knots straight into the weaving, and we'll tuck them under. I know in 2nd grade you don't have to tuck them in because we just flip the weaving over and take it off the loom. But this weaving we won't be taking off the loom. We made this pretty decorative weaving that we're going to keep on the loom always. So you're just going to keep going around, alternating over, under, and you are going to pull the knot through. And after you go around that knot a couple of bazillion times, or around the circle a couple bazillion times, then we'll tuck that knot in. So I'm going to pull this string and make sure the bunny ears of the knot kind of stick up a little bit so I know where to tuck them in at. So I'm going to go around, and you can tuck as you go, or you can save it for the very end and tuck them at the very end. But I'm going to show you how to tuck your knots in. But I got to go around it a couple of times first. Okay, so if you want to tuck as you go, or it doesn't matter if you want to tuck at the end, that's fine too. But no matter whenever you're ready to tuck, you're going to put your finger under the weaving, and then you can take, I like to take scissors, take the point of the scissors and just push the knot in. Let me zoom in so you can see a little bit better. Alright, so here's my knot right here. You're going to take and just push that in and take the bunny ears and push that through. But again, if you're going to tuck as you go like I just did, you want to make sure that you've woven around the knot a couple of times before you tuck, because the bunny ears are going to want to stick out from the knot like this. And that's fine if they stick out like that. You can just weave over the top of them, but I don't want them to kind of get stuck up through the underneath of my weaving, so I'm going to tuck that knot underneath this circle so I don't see it anymore, and then just keep going around and around to cover up that knot in the bunny ear. So I probably could have gone around a few more times before I tucked, and then that wouldn't have been an issue, but it would have been less of an issue. So you're going to keep going around and around. When you get to the end of this string, you tie a new string on. As you start to work your way around the outside, out towards the edges, it's going to get bigger. And so you can see I had a lot of orange, just a little bit of red, a little bit of the salmon color, some more blue. as you work your way out towards the edge of the circle, the same amount of yarn is going to make smaller spaces. So let's say you cut 2 arms lengths every time you go. Your first 2 arms lengths, they're going to take up a big spot in the middle. And then your next 2 arms lengths, they're going to take up a little bit less and a little bit less because the circumference of the circle is getting bigger, so it's taking up more yarn. And you're going to weave until you get along the outer edges of your warp strings and it gets too tight or really tight and uncomfortable. This is not anywhere near being finished. It needs to go until we get almost to the edges of the warp strings. So you can see the ends of my warp strings here and how close the yarn is to the edge. So I would say take your knuckle, bend your knuckle, your pointer finger, bend it, and from the first knuckle to the next knuckle, measure. And if you lay that down and your yarn touches your knuckle, you lay one knuckle down the edge of the circle and the yarn touches your knuckle, this knuckle, then you're done. You can be finished. If you lay your knuckles down like this and the yarn doesn't touch, and it's way over here, then you need to do some more weaving. So obviously if I put my knuckle down right here, that's not anywhere close. So when you're finished, you're going to take the end of the string, the end of the yarn, so let's say this was finished, you'll take the end of the yarn and you'll lift up the weaving and you'll just tuck it behind your weaving, just like that. You'll tuck that in and you'll be finished. Turn it in to me in the turn-in box and I'll grade it, take a photograph of it for Art Sonia and get it back to you. Good job, 5th grade.